Welcome to Triple C Stories. Get ready for thrilling African folktales filled with wisdom, adventure, and unforgettable lessons. Don't just watch, like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories alive.
The morning air was crisp as sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the towering office building. Employees moved briskly through the lobby, their shoes tapping sharply against the marble floor. In the midst of this, Michael sat quietly in his corner office, sipping a cup of black coffee. His eyes drifted toward the glass walls that offered a view of the bustling streets below. Despite the wealth he had accumulated over the years, he often found himself feeling strangely detached from it all. His suits were impeccably tailored, his watch gleamed with quiet elegance, and his car, a sleek black sedan, waited for him in the private parking lot. Yet, none of it felt truly meaningful. Michael had always been different from his friends, men who flaunted their wealth like medals of honor, throwing extravagant parties and chasing women who were drawn to their fortunes. Michael had tried that lifestyle briefly in his younger years, but it never brought him the fulfillment he sought. What he longed for was something deeper, someone who would see past his wealth and love him for who he truly was. He had grown tired of women who seemed more enamored with his status than his character. The forced smiles, the shallow compliments, they all felt empty. Over the years, he'd learned to see through the false charm, and he withdrew more and more from the social circles his friends reveled in. His refusal to settle down had earned him a reputation. Some called him picky, others whispered that he was afraid of commitment, but Michael didn't care. He knew what he wanted, and he wasn't willing to compromise. The day Sophia first caught Michael's eye, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was standing quietly in the corner of the company's cafeteria, wiping down tables with practiced ease. A loose strand of hair fell across her face, and she tucked it behind her ear, her brow furrowed in concentration. There was nothing particularly striking about her appearance. Her uniform was plain, her shoes slightly worn, yet there was something about her that made Michael pause. He watched as she moved with quiet determination, ignoring the dismissive glances from employees who walked past her without so much as a nod of acknowledgement. Michael didn't know why he kept watching her, but something about her focus intrigued him. Sophia was no stranger to hard work. She had grown up in a modest home, where every penny counted. Her father had passed away when she was still a teenager, leaving her mother to raise her and her younger siblings alone. Sophia had dropped out of school to help support her family, taking whatever job she could find to make ends meet. Cleaning wasn't her dream, far from it, but it paid the bills, and she wasn't one to complain. Still, she carried a quiet hope that one day she would return to her studies, earn a degree, and build a better life for her family. Each night after work, she would sit by the window of their cramped apartment, flipping through old textbooks her friends had given her, determined not to let her circumstances define her future. For her, education wasn't just about ambition, it was a way out, a chance to give her siblings the life they deserved. Michael found himself noticing Sophia more frequently after that day. He would pass her in the hallways, catch glimpses of her in the cafeteria, or see her pushing a cleaning cart through the lobby. She never seemed to notice him, or anyone else, for that matter. She kept her head down, focused on her work, quietly slipping in and out of rooms like a shadow. Unlike most people in the building, Sophia didn't seem particularly impressed by the wealth and grandeur that surrounded her. The lavish suits, the sleek cars, the towering offices. None of it seemed to matter to her. Michael respected that. One evening, as he was leaving the office late, he noticed her standing by the elevator. She had her cleaning supplies neatly packed into her cart, her tired eyes scanning the floor for any last scraps of litter. Michael hesitated before walking over. "Long day?" he asked casually, unsure why he felt so nervous. Sophia glanced up, startled. "Oh, yeah," she said quietly, her voice soft. "Just finishing up." She offered a polite smile, the kind reserved for strangers. Michael didn't know what to say next. He wasn't used to feeling awkward. People usually worked hard to impress him, not the other way around. "I'm Michael," he said finally, feeling foolish for introducing himself to someone who had probably cleaned his office 100 times before. "Sophia," she replied. There was no hint of recognition in her eyes. She had no idea who he was. That surprised him, and for some reason, it made him smile. Over the next few weeks, Michael went out of his way to cross paths with Sophia. He lingered in the cafeteria longer than necessary, hoping to catch a glimpse of her during her breaks. He started arriving at the office earlier, knowing she often cleaned the lobby before sunrise. Each time they spoke, their conversations remained brief, polite exchanges about work or the weather, but Michael found himself drawn to her quiet presence. There was no pretense in her, no carefully rehearsed charm designed to win him over. She was simply herself, hard-working, humble, and quietly determined. Michael admired that about her. His friends, however, couldn't understand his growing fascination with the company's cleaner. "You're wasting your time," his friend Richard had scoffed one evening as they sat at a rooftop bar. "A woman like that won't understand your life. She'll slow you down." Michael knew Richard meant well, but he couldn't help feeling irritated. His friends had always assumed that wealth was the only thing that mattered, that finding a partner who could fit into their world was the key to happiness. But Michael didn't want someone who cared about designer clothes or expensive vacations. He wanted someone who would sit with him in silence on a quiet evening, who would love him not for his wealth but for the man he was beneath it all. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that Sophia was different. Yet despite his growing feelings, Michael struggled to find a way to connect with her. Sophia, on the other hand, remained focused on her goals. She had no idea that Michael was anything more than a kind stranger who occasionally stopped to chat. Her mind was occupied with thoughts of her family, her younger brother's school fees, her mother's growing health concerns, the mounting bills that seemed impossible to manage. She had no time for distractions, not even kind-hearted ones. At night, she would sit by the window of their apartment, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet her fingers still turning the pages of her old textbooks. She knew that the life she dreamed of wouldn't come easily, but she was determined to build it, no matter how long it took. The morning light poured softly through the glass windows of the elegant cafe, bathing the room in a golden glow. Michael sat in his usual corner, a cup of steaming coffee cradled in his hand. His sharp suit hugged his broad shoulders, and a silver watch gleamed on his wrist, a subtle hint of wealth, though far less ostentatious than what his circle of friends would expect. He often came here alone, finding comfort in the warm hum of conversations around him, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness that seemed to follow him home these days. His friends often teased him about his reclusive habits, wondering why a man of his status spent so much time hiding away in modest cafes and quiet streets instead of basking in luxury. But Michael valued the simplicity of places like this, where no one knew or cared about his wealth. As he sipped his coffee, his gaze wandered across the room and settled on a young woman cleaning the far corner. Her back was to him, her slender figure bent slightly as she wiped down a table with deliberate care. She wore the navy blue uniform of the cleaning staff, her hair tied back neatly with a black ribbon. Something about her caught his attention, not her appearance, but her focus, the way she moved with quiet determination. He had seen her before, of course. The cafe belonged to one of his friends, and Michael had noticed her during his previous visits. He watched as she paused to adjust her sleeves, revealing thin wrists marked by faint scars. The sight struck him, scars born of hard labor, perhaps from cleaning chemicals or relentless scrubbing. He felt a strange pull, a flicker of curiosity that unsettled him. It wasn't just pity, it was something deeper, a sense of admiration for someone who seemed to carry an unseen weight yet remained steadfast in her tasks. As he sat there, watching her move from table to table, he found himself wondering about her life, what dreams she held, what struggles she faced. Later that evening, Michael sat quietly in his office, his mind still lingering on the cleaner. His desk was cluttered with documents, contracts, proposals, and financial records that required his attention. Yet his thoughts kept drifting back to her. How she had tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she thought no one was looking. How her tired smile had briefly flickered when another worker cracked a joke. He couldn't understand why she occupied his thoughts so intensely. Perhaps it was her simplicity, the quiet strength she seemed to carry, so unlike the polished and pretentious women who often circled him, eager to impress. Michael had grown weary of that world, the constant charade of wealth and status. His friends often paraded their expensive cars and designer suits, yet their conversations were empty, revolving around deals, vacations, and social climbing. Each time he found himself in those circles, Michael felt suffocated. He had grown up in wealth, yet he longed for something real, something genuine. His parents had been relentless in their pursuit of affluence, drilling into him the importance of power and image. His father's voice still echoed in his mind, stern and unyielding. You marry a woman who elevates you, someone with class and connections. Yet that idea had always troubled Michael. The women he met through his parents' circles all seemed to follow a pattern, beautiful, accomplished, but wrapped in an air of entitlement that felt suffocating. He had tried, over the years, to connect with them, but the conversations always felt shallow. They were drawn to his wealth, not to him. He often wondered what it would be like to be seen as just Michael, a man who enjoyed quiet moments and simple pleasures. Perhaps that was why the cleaner had stayed in his mind, because she seemed untouched by the world he was trying to escape. Days passed, yet Michael found himself lingering in the cafe more often than before. He didn't approach her, not yet. Instead, he watched from a distance, noticing the small details that others overlooked. The way she greeted the elderly man who visited daily with a warm smile, how she wiped down chairs twice to ensure they were spotless, or the careful way she arranged the sugar jars on each table. It was clear she took pride in her work, despite its modest nature. One afternoon, as Michael sat sipping his coffee, he overheard a conversation between the cafe owner and another employee. That girl, the owner said, nodding toward the cleaner. She's been here for almost 2 years. Never late. Never complains. Said she's saving up for university. The words struck Michael. University. He glanced back at her, surprised. She couldn't have been more than 24 or 25. He imagined the weight of her responsibilities, working long hours, likely earning little, all while trying to pursue her dreams. He knew people like her rarely got the breaks they deserved. That night, Michael lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories of his privileged upbringing surfaced. His private tutors, elite schools, and the countless opportunities handed to him without effort. He thought about how hard she must have worked for even the simplest of things. The thought unsettled him. The next morning, he returned to the cafe early, arriving before most of the regular customers. The cleaner was already there, sweeping near the entrance. Summoning his courage, Michael approached her. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than usual. She turned, her gaze wary but polite. "Good morning, sir," she replied, her voice quiet. Michael hesitated, suddenly unsure what to say. I just wanted to say I've noticed how hard you work," he managed. "It's impressive." She blinked, clearly surprised, then smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying a trace of exhaustion. "I'm just doing my job." Michael nodded, feeling oddly nervous. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia," she answered. Sophia ackened. "Well, Sophia," Michael said, "I hope your day goes well." He walked away quickly, feeling foolish. Yet as he reached his usual table, he found himself smiling. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he had taken a step toward something real. Over the following weeks, Michael found himself seeking out Sophia's presence whenever he visited the cafe. Their conversations were brief at first. Simple greetings, casual remarks about the weather or the busyness of the cafe. Yet those small exchanges began to grow. Michael learned that Sophia had grown up in a struggling household, her parents working tirelessly to keep food on the table. She had taken the cleaning job not just to survive, but to fund her education. "I want to study business," she told him one afternoon, her voice steady with quiet determination. "I want to open my own store someday. Something my family can be proud of." Her words stirred something in Michael, an admiration that deepened with each passing day. He saw the fire in her eyes, the hunger to break free from hardship. She never complained about her struggles, never pitted herself. Instead, she spoke of her dreams as though they were inevitable, as if her hard work would one day turn those dreams into reality. Michael admired that. She was everything the women in his circle were not: grounded, ambitious, and strong-willed. Yet despite their growing connection, Michael kept his feelings guarded. He worried that revealing his wealth would shatter what they had built. Would she see him differently if she knew? Would their conversations shift from genuine warmth to calculated charm? The thought plagued him. And so, he remained simply Michael, a man who visited the cafe often and enjoyed her company. It wasn't a lie, he told himself. It was a chance to be known for who he really was. Yet with each passing day, the truth loomed closer, threatening to disrupt everything he had come to cherish. The morning air carried a faint chill, crisp enough to awaken the senses yet gentle enough to feel like a whispered reminder of the approaching dawn. Michael sat in his sleek black car parked at the far end of the company's parking lot, his gaze fixed on the employees filing in through the side entrance. He recognized many of them, junior staff dressed in simple clothes, some chatting in low tones, others clutching their bags tightly as they hurried inside. His eyes, however, searched for only one person. When he finally spotted her, his breath hitched slightly. There she was, Sophia, her slender frame clad in her usual dark uniform, hair neatly tied back, and her expression focused yet tired. She walked briskly, shoulders squared as though determined to carry the invisible weight that seemed to press down on her. Michael knew that burden too well, the kind that forced people to keep moving forward, no matter how exhausting the path seemed. He had watched Sophia from afar for weeks now, fascinated by her quiet resilience. Unlike the women he often encountered, those drawn to his wealth and status, Sophia seemed utterly uninterested in such things. In fact, she hardly acknowledged him at all. While others flattered him, Sophia kept her distance, exchanging only brief greetings when necessary. Michael admired that. He respected her pride, her unwavering determination to forge her own path despite the struggles she clearly faced. Still, he wondered how much longer she could keep enduring it alone. He had overheard one of her co-workers mention how Sophia worked extra shifts to support her family. Rumors whispered that she dreamed of going back to school, but tuition was far out of reach. Michael felt an unexpected pang of empathy, a sensation that had grown stronger each time he caught sight of her. He knew that feeling, the desire to push forward, to build something greater than what life had offered. Memories of his own struggles rose to the surface. Late nights spent studying under dim lights, working multiple jobs while trying to escape the shadow of his father's disapproval. Those memories had hardened him, but they had also given him an understanding of what it meant to fight for something more. Sophia reminded him of that struggle. Perhaps that's why he found himself drawn to her, not out of pity, but out of a genuine desire to see her succeed. Yet despite his intentions, he hesitated to approach her. The last thing he wanted was for Sophia to think he was yet another wealthy man offering charity disguised as affection. His wealth had attracted too many empty relationships in the past. Women who smiled too brightly, spoke too sweetly, and whispered promises that never felt genuine. He had grown tired of it all. Tired of being loved for what he had rather than who he was. Sophia felt different. She was real, grounded in a way that Michael had longed for without realizing it. The following evening, Michael found himself walking through the quiet corridors of his company's maintenance wing. The air smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, and the dull hum of vacuum cleaners echoed from nearby rooms. He knew it was foolish to be here. His presence was unnecessary and unexpected, yet something compelled him to continue. As he turned a corner, he spotted Sophia at the far end of the hallway. She stood alone, wiping down a glass window with slow, deliberate movements. Her expression was distant, her mind clearly somewhere else. Michael paused, uncertain whether to approach. For a moment, he considered turning back, convincing himself that it was better to admire her from afar, but before he could retreat, Sophia glanced up and noticed him. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. "Mr. Michael," Sophia greeted softly, lowering her cleaning cloth. "Is something wrong?" Her voice was polite but guarded, her posture stiff. Michael cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. "No, nothing's wrong," he said. "I was just taking a walk." Sophia's eyebrows arched slightly, her expression skeptical. "In this part of the building?" Michael chuckled lightly, hoping to ease the tension. "I guess I needed some quiet." Sophia nodded slowly, clearly unconvinced. She turned back to her work, resuming her rhythmic wiping across the glass. Michael lingered a moment longer before speaking again. "I've noticed you've been working a lot of extra hours," he said carefully. "That must be exhausting." Sophia's hand froze mid-swipe, and she turned to face him again. "I manage," she said simply. There was no bitterness in her voice, just quiet resolve. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "If you ever need—" "I don't," Sophia interrupted, her tone firmer this time. "I appreciate the concern, but I can handle things myself." Michael admired her strength, yet he couldn't ignore the weariness in her eyes, the faint shadows beneath them and the tightness in her expression. "I understand," he said finally. "But, if you ever change your mind, I'm here." Sophia didn't reply. She only nodded before returning to her work. Michael turned to leave, feeling oddly unsettled. He had expected Sophia to resist his offer, yet her coldness had stung more than he anticipated. Perhaps she thought he was only being charitable, a wealthy man trying to ease his conscience. He wanted her to know that wasn't the case. But how could he make her see that? Days passed, yet Michael's thoughts remained fixated on Sophia. He found himself seeking glimpses of her more often, pausing by the maintenance wing or lingering near the staff entrance. Each time, he told himself it was coincidence, yet deep down he knew better. Sophia's presence had become an unexpected comfort, a reminder of something genuine in a world that often felt superficial. Yet despite his growing feelings, Michael hesitated to act. He feared overwhelming her, afraid that his interest would only push her further away. One afternoon, while walking through the lobby, Michael overheard two employees discussing Sophia. "She's been struggling lately," one of them whispered. "Her mom's been sick, and I heard her sister's still in school. No wonder she's been picking up extra shifts." Michael's chest tightened. He hadn't realized Michael's burdens stretched so far. He knew then that he couldn't stand by any longer. Later that evening, he waited outside the building's side entrance. The sky had darkened, and a cold breeze whispered through the streets. When Sophia finally emerged, her shoulders were slumped with exhaustion. She barely noticed Michael until he called her name. Sophia. She paused, her expression wary. What are you doing here? Michael hesitated, unsure how to begin. I heard about your family, he said quietly. I wanted to help. Sophia's face hardened. I told you I can manage, she said firmly. I don't need anyone's pity. It's not pity, Michael said quickly. You think because you're wealthy you can fix everything? Sophia interrupted, her voice rising. You don't understand what it's like to struggle, to feel like you're constantly drowning and no one's coming to save you. Her words struck Michael like a blow. You're right, he said softly. I don't know what it's like for you. But I do know what it's like to feel alone, to fight for something you believe in while everyone else doubts you. Sophia's expression faltered, her anger dimming slightly. I'm not offering you charity, Michael continued. I'm offering you someone to lean on, if you'll let me. Sophia's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she shook her head. I don't have time for distractions, she muttered before turning and walking away. Michael watched her disappear into the night, frustration simmering beneath his disappointment. He had hoped Sophia would see his sincerity, yet she seemed determined to carry her burdens alone. As much as Michael admired her strength, he knew one thing for certain. No one could fight the world entirely on their own. The morning air was crisp, and Sophia moved quietly through the office as she began her shift. The building was still empty, the executives wouldn't start arriving for at least another hour, and she relished the rare moments of peace before the rush began. The quiet gave her time to think, though lately, her thoughts had become more restless than comforting. Her mind kept drifting back to Michael, the man she had met only a few weeks earlier. He wasn't like the other employees in the building. He didn't bark orders, didn't dismiss her as just another face in the background. In fact, he seemed to notice her in a way no one else did. At first, she had been suspicious of his attention. People in this company rarely spared a second glance for the cleaning staff unless they needed something. But Michael was different. He greeted her warmly every evening, sometimes asking about her day, other times quietly sharing a small observation about something he'd read. Their conversations started small, brief exchanges that lasted no longer than a minute, but over time, those moments began to stretch. Some evenings, she would find him sitting quietly in the break room, reading a book or scribbling in a notebook. He never seemed in a rush to leave, and somehow, Sophia found herself lingering a little longer in those moments. Each conversation left her feeling a little lighter, as if the weight of her responsibilities didn't feel quite so crushing. One evening, after finishing her rounds early, Sophia lingered in the break room longer than usual. Michael was there, sitting at his usual table, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. He glanced up when she walked in and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made her heart stumble. "Rough day?" he asked. Sophia let out a dry laugh as she grabbed a cloth from her cleaning cart and wiped down the counter. "They're all rough," she said. "But I manage." Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he set his coffee down and closed the book he had been reading. "You always seem to be moving," he said thoughtfully. "Like you're afraid to stop." Sophia froze for a moment, her fingers tightening around the cloth. She wasn't sure why his words unsettled her so much. Maybe because they were true. "I don't really have a choice," she said eventually. "My family's counting on me." Michael's gaze softened, and Sophia found herself telling him more than she intended. She told him about her mother, how her illness had drained their family savings, leaving Sophia to step up as the primary provider. She spoke about her siblings, how she was determined to make sure they finished school, how she wanted more for them than the life she had. Michael listened quietly, never interrupting. For some reason, his silence made her feel safe, like she could say what she really felt without being judged. "I just want things to be different," she confessed. "I don't want to spend my whole life cleaning offices while my dreams stay out of reach." "You won't," Michael said firmly. "I can see how hard you're working. People like you don't stay stuck forever." His words stirred something inside her, a fragile flicker of hope that she had tried to bury long ago. For years, Sophia had told herself that her dreams of becoming an architect were foolish, that her responsibilities would always come first. But when Michael said it, it didn't sound impossible. That night, as she finished her shift and walked home beneath the dim glow of streetlights, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about his words. She had spent so long convincing herself that her life was set in stone, that she would always be the struggling cleaner, forever trying to pull her family out of poverty. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for more. As the weeks passed, Sophia found herself drawn to Michael's presence more and more. Their conversations grew longer, their connection deepening with each passing evening. It felt strange, yet comforting, to have someone in her corner. Michael never pressured her to talk, but somehow, he always seemed to know when she needed to. Some evenings, they barely spoke at all. He would sit quietly at his table, writing in his notebook while she worked. Yet even in the silence, Sophia felt something she couldn't explain, a sense of comfort, of belonging. She knew she was growing too attached, yet she couldn't seem to stop herself. Each evening, she found herself lingering just a little longer, hoping for another chance to talk with him. But what troubled her most was the way Michael seemed to know her so well. He noticed the small things, when she was tired, when she was upset, even when she was quietly proud of herself for finishing a long day. His kindness unsettled her, yet it also made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that Michael wasn't just another employee, that there was something different about him. But she couldn't imagine why a man like him, quiet, thoughtful and kind, would go out of his way to befriend her. The truth about Michael's identity still weighed heavily on his mind. Every evening, as he sat in the break room, waiting for Sophia to finish her rounds, he debated whether to tell her the truth. He had wanted to from the beginning, yet each time the moment came, he faltered. Part of him feared that once Sophia knew he was the CEO, she would pull away, that she would assume his kindness had been an act or worse, that she would believe he had been playing games with her. Michael had seen it happen before, women pretending to care about him only to chase after his wealth once they realized who he was. But Sophia was different. She wasn't like the socialites his friends spent time with, the women who flaunted designer clothes and spent their evenings sipping cocktails at expensive parties. Sophia was real, honest and determined. He admired her strength, her dedication to her family, and the quiet pride she carried despite her struggles. But the longer he kept the truth from her, the harder it became to imagine how she might react. He didn't want to lose what they had built, those quiet moments of conversation, those small glimpses of trust, but deep down, he knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. The morning light stretched lazily across the city skyline as Sophia walked to work, her mind burdened with questions she couldn't escape. The words she had overheard the night before, those quiet remarks about the boss who stayed late, refused to leave her thoughts. Every step she took felt heavier than usual, as if the doubt she carried had rooted itself deep inside her. Sophia wanted to dismiss the idea, to believe that Michael was exactly who he seemed to be, but something about the way he avoided talking about himself didn't sit right with her. Their conversations had always felt warm and genuine, yet whenever she asked about his personal life, Michael always steered the topic back to her. She had told him everything, her struggles, her dreams, her family's hardships, yet she knew almost nothing about him. Was he ashamed of something? Or worse, was he lying about who he really was? The thought made her stomach twist uncomfortably. As she stepped through the company's revolving doors, Sophia resolved to put the nagging doubts aside. Michael had been kind, more thoughtful and genuine than most people she had met in this building, and she didn't want to believe he could be anything less than sincere. The morning dragged on slowly. Sophia moved through her usual cleaning routine, scrubbing windows, wiping down desks, and emptying wastebaskets, but her mind remained restless. When she reached the conference room where Michael often lingered in the evenings, she paused. The large glass windows overlooked the city, the morning light bouncing off steel rooftops and car windshields below. She wondered what Michael saw when he sat here for hours after everyone had gone home. Was he simply lonely? Or was there something more? As she cleaned the glass, a voice startled her. "Taking my place already?" Michael's familiar voice broke her thoughts, and Sophia turned to see him standing in the doorway. He smiled warmly, but there was something guarded in his expression, something Sophia hadn't noticed before. "I didn't think you came in this early," she said, forcing her voice to sound casual. "I needed a quiet place to think," Michael replied, stepping inside. "I figured this room was the best spot." Sophia wanted to ask him why he always seemed to be hiding from the rest of the company, why she never saw him interact with other employees, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile. "Well, I'll leave you to it," she said, gathering her supplies. Michael's smile faded slightly, as though he sensed something was wrong. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Sophia paused in the doorway, debating whether to ask him outright about what she had overheard. But something held her back, a quiet fear that whatever she learned might shatter the comfort she had found in their friendship. "I'm fine," she said finally, forcing a smile. "Just tired." She hurried down the hallway before Michael could say anything else. That evening, Sophia lingered longer than usual in the break room, hoping to avoid another awkward encounter with Michael. She knew she couldn't keep dodging him forever. He would eventually notice that something had changed, but she needed time to sort through her thoughts. As she sat at a corner table with a cup of tea, she noticed a group of employees chatting near the vending machine. Their conversation was low, but Sophia caught enough words to piece it together. "He's never seen with anyone," one woman muttered. "Always alone, always quiet. But the guy's loaded. Owns half the building, from what I've heard." Sophia's pulse quickened. There it was again, the rumor that Michael was someone far more powerful than he pretended to be. She told herself it couldn't be true, that Michael wasn't the kind of man who would sit in the shadows while his employees whispered about him. But doubt gnawed at her mind. She remembered how careful he was when talking about himself, how vague his answers always seemed. With her heart pounding in her chest, Sophia quietly left the break room and walked toward the elevators. If Michael wasn't going to tell her the truth, she would find out for herself. Sophia knew little about the company's higher-ups, but she had cleaned their offices enough times to recognize names on paperwork and plaques. After a few minutes of careful searching, she found what she was looking for. Michael's full name printed neatly on the CEO's office door. Sophia stared at the polished gold letters for a long moment, her mind racing. The truth hit her like a wave, cold and undeniable. Michael wasn't just some quiet consultant or manager. He was the head of the entire company, the same company she had spent months working in. Anger flared inside her, anger that he had lied, anger that he had let her believe he was just another employee. Sophia turned away from the door, her hands trembling. She didn't know what hurt more, that he had kept the truth from her, or that she had trusted him so easily. All those conversations, the way he had encouraged her, listened to her, comforted her, now felt tainted. Was he just pretending? Was his kindness some twisted act of pity? The questions swirled inside her, suffocating her thoughts. Sophia knew she couldn't face Michael yet, not until she knew exactly what to say. So she walked away, her heart heavy with disappointment and confusion. The days following the company event felt like a blur to Sophia. Each morning, she dragged herself out of bed, went to work, and tried her best to avoid any reminders of Michael. But no matter how hard she tried, his face haunted her thoughts. She couldn't forget the way he had looked on stage, confident yet composed, as he delivered a speech to an audience filled with powerful executives. Sophia had been in the corner of the hall, arranging trays and wiping tables when she heard his voice echo through the room. She had turned, half expecting to see someone else. But there he was, dressed in an expensive suit, speaking with a calm authority she hadn't seen before. The man she thought she knew was not just an ordinary employee. He was Michael Aldridge, the CEO of the very company she worked for. The realization struck her like a blow. She had spent weeks opening up to him, confiding her struggles, sharing her dreams, believing that he understood her world. Yet all this time, he had been living in a world of wealth and influence, one she could never belong to. That evening, she left the event without a word. She ignored his calls and texts in the days that followed, unable to face him. Each time her phone lit up with his name, her chest tightened with anger and disappointment. She felt foolish for ever believing that someone like him, a powerful man with money and privilege, could truly understand her life. Michael, on the other hand, was restless. He had tried everything to reach Sophia. Texts, calls, and even lingering near the cleaning staff's room after hours, but she avoided him at every turn. Each morning, he would sit at his desk, pretending to work while his mind drifted to her. He replayed their conversations, remembering the warmth in her voice when she spoke about her family, her dreams of becoming an architect, and her determination to lift her loved ones out of poverty. He had seen something special in Sophia, a strength he rarely encountered in his world of corporate politics and empty smiles. But now he feared he had ruined it all. The truth was, Michael hadn't lied. Not really. He never claimed to be someone he wasn't. But he had let Sophia believe he was just an ordinary worker because he had feared what would happen if she knew the truth. Too many times, he had watched women smile sweetly at him when they learned his last name, suddenly eager to win his attention. He had grown cynical, unsure who truly cared for him and who was merely after his wealth. Sophia had been different. She hadn't cared about expensive suits or grand gestures. She liked him for his simplicity, for the quiet conversations they shared during her cleaning rounds. Now that he had lost that connection, Michael felt an ache that refused to fade. He knew he had to fix this, but no matter how hard he tried, Sophia seemed determined to keep her distance. One evening, Michael found himself waiting outside the building where Sophia usually exited after her shift. He stood there for over an hour, feeling ridiculous but too determined to leave. When she finally appeared, her bag slung over her shoulder and her face drawn with exhaustion, Michael stepped forward. "Sophia," he called softly. She froze, her eyes narrowing as she saw him. "Please," he said, his voice pleading. "Just hear me out." Sophia exhaled sharply, her fingers tightening on her bag strap. "I don't have anything to say to you," she muttered, turning to walk away. "Wait," Michael insisted, stepping in front of her. "I know you're upset. I get it. But please. I didn't lie to you. I wanted you to know me without all the expectations." Sophia's expression hardened. Without the expectations, she repeated bitterly. You think that makes it better? She shook her head, her voice trembling with frustration. I trusted you. I told you things I've never told anyone. And all this time you were playing a game. Michael's face fell. It wasn't a game, he said quietly. I didn't want you to think I was just another rich guy who gets what he wants. I didn't want you to see my family name before you saw me. Sophia's shoulders sagged as she looked away. But you still let me believe something that wasn't true, she said, her voice softer now. And now I don't know what to believe. Michael swallowed hard, sensing her pain. Please, he said again. Let me prove to you that what we had, it was real. For a moment, Sophia's gaze softened, but then her walls rose again. I need time, she muttered, stepping past him. Michael watched her walk away, his heart heavy with regret. He knew that winning her trust again wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't ready to give up. Days passed, and Sophia found herself feeling torn. Her mind kept replaying their conversations, the nights they had spent talking quietly in empty offices, the way Michael had smiled when she spoke about her family, the warmth in his voice when he called her incredible. Part of her wanted to believe that his feelings had been genuine, that he hadn't just been toying with her. But her doubts ran deep. She had seen too many wealthy people treat others like stepping stones, using kindness as a tool for control. Her past was littered with memories of broken promises. Promises from men who claimed to care but left when things became difficult. The idea of allowing Michael back into her life felt like inviting heartache all over again. Yet despite her fears, a part of her missed him. Missed the way he listened without judgment, the way he seemed to understand her struggles even if he couldn't relate to them directly. Late one evening, Sophia sat alone in her small apartment, her textbooks spread across the table. She tried to focus on her notes, but her mind kept drifting to Michael. His voice, his smile, his plea for her to give him another chance. With a sigh, she closed her books and leaned back in her chair. Maybe he deserved a chance to explain, not because she fully trusted him yet, but because part of her still hoped that what they shared had been real. And so, the following evening, she made her way back to the office. Not for work, but to find Michael and hear what he had to say. The days that followed felt longer than Sophia could endure. The weight of her mother's illness pressed heavily on her, and no matter how determined she was to carry it alone, the strain seemed to grow unbearable. She filled her schedule with endless shifts, scrubbing floors and cleaning offices until her fingers were raw and her back ached. The late nights became a blur of exhaustion, and yet, every morning she rose again, her mind fixed on her mother's fragile condition. Each morning, Sophia made her way to the hospital before her shift, forcing a smile as she sat beside her mother's bed. The scent of disinfectant filled the room, sharp and bitter, but she masked her anxiety, speaking cheerfully about trivial things. The weather, her work, anything to keep her mother's mind from worrying. But despite her best efforts, her mother's face remained pale, her strength fading with each passing day. Later that evening, Sophia returned home to find her sister waiting anxiously by the door. "Mom's doing worse," her sister said, her voice shaking. Panic surged through Sophia's chest, and she hurried inside. Her mother lay on the bed, her breathing shallow and strained. Sophia's sister explained that a neighbor had called for an ambulance earlier, but the hospital was demanding an advance payment before they could admit her mother for urgent care. Sophia's heart sank. The hospital wouldn't treat her mother unless they received a deposit, one that Sophia simply couldn't afford. She felt her world spinning out of control. Desperate, she rushed back out the door, determined to find a way. She knew there was no one she could borrow money from. Her neighbors were just as overburdened as her own family. With nowhere else to turn, Sophia made her way back to the company building. It was late, and the offices were dark, but she knew Michael often stayed late in his private office. She didn't want to ask him for help. The idea made her stomach twist, but she didn't have a choice. Her mother's life was on the line. As she reached his office door, her hand froze halfway to the handle. How could she ask him for such a favor? What if he assumed she was manipulating him for money? Her pride screamed at her to walk away, but the thought of her mother gasping for breath in that hospital bed pushed her forward. Before she could knock, the door swung open, and Michael appeared, startled to see her. "Sophia?" he asked, his expression softening when he saw the distress written across her face. She opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. Instead, tears welled in her eyes, and the silent sob that escaped her was enough for Michael to understand that something was terribly wrong. By the following morning, Sophia's mother was comfortably resting in a hospital bed, her breathing steadier and her color returning. Sophia sat beside her, still unable to believe what had happened. After breaking down in front of Michael, she had barely managed to explain her mother's condition before he quietly told her not to worry. Without hesitation, he had stepped away to make a call, and within an hour, the hospital had admitted her mother without question. Sophia didn't know what strings Michael had pulled, but when she tried to ask, he had simply told her to focus on her mother's recovery. Now, as her mother's frail hand rested lightly in hers, Sophia felt both immense relief and uncomfortable gratitude. She knew Michael had meant well, but a knot of frustration twisted inside her. This wasn't how she wanted things to be. Sophia had spent her entire life working hard to stand on her own, to prove that her family's future didn't have to depend on favors or handouts. She wanted to build something real, something she could take pride in. Yet here she was, feeling powerless and small once again. Her pride told her she owed Michael nothing, but her heart whispered something different, that his kindness had come from a place of genuine care. That evening, when Michael visited the hospital to check on her mother, Sophia met him outside in the dimly lit corridor. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know," Michael replied quietly. "But I wanted to help." Sophia shook her head. "I can't have you fix everything for me." Michael met her gaze, his expression softening. "I'm not trying to fix everything," he said gently. "I just wanted to be there, because I care about you." Something in his voice softened the knot in Sophia's chest. She stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. Michael gave her a small smile, and in that moment, she realized that perhaps letting someone in didn't mean losing her strength. It meant finding the courage to accept love when it was freely given. The days stretched on, each one feeling longer than the last. Sophia found herself moving through her routine like a machine, waking up early, preparing breakfast for her siblings, and heading to her cleaning job at the company. The weight of her mother's illness loomed over her like a dark cloud, and no matter how hard she tried to focus, her mind kept drifting back to the hospital room where her mother lay, pale and weak. Sophia had spent countless evenings there, sitting quietly by her mother's side, gripping her cold hand and praying silently for a miracle. The doctors had assured her that her mother's condition was improving, but the bills were relentless. Each visit to the billing office felt like another blow to her fragile spirit. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia picked up additional shifts, pushing her body to the limit just to make ends meet. The long hours weighed heavily on her, but she refused to give up, not when her family depended on her. Some nights, she would return home so drained that she barely managed to shower before collapsing into bed. Yet no matter how tired she felt, she always forced herself to get up the next day and start again. Michael, meanwhile, was restless. Ever since he heard about Sophia's mother's illness, he had been plagued with worry. He had overheard one of the staff talking about how Sophia was barely sleeping and had taken on multiple extra shifts to cover her mother's hospital bills. The news troubled him deeply. He knew Sophia's pride would never allow her to ask for help, but that didn't stop him from worrying. For days, he debated whether to step in. He wrestled with the idea of secretly helping her, knowing how fiercely independent she was. He knew she would resist, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. One afternoon, after endless pacing in his office, he made a decision. Quietly, Michael arranged to have the hospital bills paid in full. He instructed the hospital staff not to reveal his identity, believing that this was the only way Sophia would accept the help without feeling indebted. He convinced himself that he was doing the right thing, that this wasn't about pity or charity, but about love. He cared about Sophia deeply, and seeing her struggle pained him more than he could admit. When the hospital confirmed that the payments had been processed, Michael felt a small wave of relief. He hoped that this would at least ease her burden. Days later, Sophia visited the hospital's billing office, prepared to plead for more time to pay off the mounting expenses. She had barely slept the night before, her mind spinning with calculations, wondering how she could possibly manage the next payment. When the clerk informed her that the bills had already been settled, Sophia was stunned. "Paid?" she repeated, barely able to comprehend the words. "By who?" The clerk only shrugged. "Anonymous donor," she said, barely looking up from her papers. Sophia's heart raced. Confusion turned quickly to suspicion, and in her gut, she knew exactly who had done this. Anger surged inside her. She felt humiliated, not because her mother's hospital bills had been paid, but because she hadn't asked for it. She knew Michael had been behind it, and the thought stung. For weeks, she had poured every ounce of her strength into working hard for her family, determined to prove to herself that she could handle things on her own. Now it felt as though Michael had taken that away from her. Sophia stormed to the office building, her frustration mounting with each step. She ignored the curious stares from her colleagues as she walked straight to Michael's office and pushed open the door without knocking. Michael looked up, surprised to see her, but before he could say a word, Sophia's voice lashed out. "You had no right," she snapped. "You think you can just fix my life with your money?" Michael stood slowly, his face clouded with concern. "Sophia, I just wanted to help." "I didn't ask for your help," she shot back, her voice rising. "I've been working myself to the bone, trying to do this on my own. You can't just throw money at my problems and expect everything to be okay." Michael's face softened. "I know you're strong," he said quietly. "I know you can handle things. But I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer alone." His voice faltered, his usual confidence replaced by something far more vulnerable. "I just wanted to be there for you, not because I think you need me to fix things, but because I care." Sophia's anger flickered, but she held firm. "You don't get to decide what I need," she said. "I've spent my whole life fighting to stand on my own." "And you've done an incredible job," Michael said gently. "But Sophia, sometimes being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." His words hung in the air, soft yet powerful. Sophia's breath hitched, her frustration melting into something closer to confusion. For so long, she had believed that asking for help was a sign of weakness, that relying on anyone else meant she wasn't strong enough. But standing in front of Michael now, she realized his intentions had never been to diminish her strength. He wasn't trying to control her, he just wanted to be there for her. "I'm not trying to take away your pride," Michael added. "I just want to stand beside you." For the first time in weeks, Sophia felt her defenses start to crumble. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him yet, but deep down, she knew that Michael's kindness had come from a place of love, not pity. Without another word, she turned and left the office, her emotions too tangled to say anything more. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding trust, one small step at a time. Sophia had grown accustomed to carrying the weight of her struggles alone, and learning to rely on someone else, especially someone like Michael, was a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready for. She kept her distance at first, hesitant to let him back into her life, but Michael was patient. He didn't push or overwhelm her. Instead, he was there in quiet, meaningful ways. He would leave her thoughtful notes tucked under her cleaning supplies, short messages of encouragement that never mentioned his wealth or status, only his belief in her. "I know you're strong," one note read, "but you don't have to carry everything alone." Sophia couldn't deny that his presence lingered in her mind long after she had returned home from work. On the nights when exhaustion threatened to consume her, she found herself thinking about Michael, not as the CEO, but as the man who had quietly supported her, even when she had rejected him. When her mother's health wavered again and hospital bills loomed once more, Sophia resisted the urge to ask for help. But when Michael quietly stepped in and paid part of the expenses without announcing it, Sophia felt something shift. She had once believed that accepting help would undermine her hard work, that it would make her seem weak or incapable. Yet Michael never treated her as someone in need of saving. Instead, he treated her as an equal, someone capable but deserving of support. One evening, after a particularly long shift, Sophia found Michael waiting outside her apartment. He looked nervous, his hands tucked into his coat pockets, but his face softened with relief when he saw her. "I just wanted to check on you," he said quietly. Sophia hesitated, then invited him inside. They talked for hours, not about work or her family's struggles, but about her dreams. She told him about her desire to become an architect, about the buildings she had sketched in old notebooks since she was a child. Michael listened intently, asking questions and encouraging her to pursue her ambitions. For the first time in a long while, Sophia felt seen, not as a cleaner or a woman weighed down by her circumstances, but as someone full of potential. That night, when Michael said goodbye, Sophia felt something she hadn't expected: hope. She knew things wouldn't change overnight, but for the first time, she believed that maybe she didn't have to face her future alone. Over the months that followed, Sophia and Michael's bond deepened in ways neither of them could have imagined. Michael continued to offer his quiet support, encouraging Sophia to pursue her education. At first, she hesitated, afraid that accepting his help would tie her to a life she didn't want, but Michael's offer came with no strings attached. "I believe in you," he told her. "And I know you'll get there whether I help or not. I just want to make the journey a little easier." With his encouragement, Sophia finally enrolled in her architecture classes. She worked tirelessly, attending her morning shifts, spending her afternoons in class, and studying late into the night. It wasn't easy, but every time exhaustion threatened to break her, she remembered Michael's quiet belief in her. He didn't smother her with grand gestures or overwhelm her with his wealth. Instead, he stood in the background, steady and constant, pushing her forward when she doubted herself. As her studies progressed, so did their relationship. Sophia began to see the man behind the wealth, the quiet soul who preferred books to boardrooms, who found joy in simple moments and shared laughter. Michael, in turn, admired Sophia's relentless determination, her refusal to take shortcuts, her insistence on building her success from the ground up. By the time Sophia's final year approached, she had grown into a woman with confidence and strength, a woman who no longer feared asking for help or accepting love. The night before her graduation, Sophia stood beside Michael on the balcony of her new apartment, a space she had paid for with her own earnings. The city lights stretched out before them, and for a moment, Sophia simply breathed it all in. The sense of achievement, the comfort of knowing she had forged her own path, and the quiet reassurance that Michael had never tried to take that away from her. "I couldn't have done this without you," Sophia whispered. Michael turned to her, his smile soft. "You would have," he replied. "I just had the privilege of watching you shine." Sophia smiled through her tears, knowing that their journey had been built not on wealth or status, but on patience, trust, and love. Their story was not one of dramatic declarations or grand rescues. It was a story of quiet resilience, of two people choosing to walk alongside each other through life's challenges, finding strength not in what they could give, but in what they could build together. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe to Triple C Stories. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section and stay tuned for more exciting stories.